It seems that Percy has decided to join me for this one. Wasn't expecting that, but there she is. Hello, and welcome to another vinyl update with Mike. I'm here. It's been a while since the last one, so I've got a decent stack of records here to go through. If you've never been on one of these before, or never listened to one of these before, basically what I do is just show off my continuing vinyl collection. Percy is wanting to lick the microphone, so I'm sure she'll go down in a second. But last time I did this, I believe, was November of 2024. Since then, Christmas has been a thing. My own birthday has been a thing. And, various other moments have been a thing to where I could occur more vinyl. So got a couple to go through here, different genres, different groups, different bands, some multiple, some not. But like I said, if you've been through this before, if you've seen one of these before, you know the sort of drill. I'm going to show them off. I'm going to talk about them briefly. And it's just a way to talk about some records that maybe won't come up on the actual Album Fight Club episodes themselves. So here's my takes on some stuff that I like and as part of my collection now. So we're going to start off with some rock records. In fact, these are two records that I got from my parents for Christmas, and it's from my favorite band of all time. So I'm glad to have more of their catalog, although they have quite the extensive catalog. So I don't know if I'll ever have the complete discography of this band, but any more albums from Rush, I will gladly take. This, of course, is Fly By Night, their second album from the band, and the first featuring the drummer extraordinaire, Neil Peart. You can see the guys on the back there, pretty young looking. I love this record. A lot of people say this is one of the better records of the first era. I'm inclined to agree. In fact, it's probably actually my favorite of the first era, which includes the self-titled first album, Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, and 2112. I actually think I like this more than 2112, believe it or not. Just so many good showings here. I don't think there's a bad song in the bunch. And in particular, I think the really good moments are really good. In particular, Anthem, the opening track, one of my favorite Rush songs. And as an opening statement from Neil Peart, both lyrically and virtuosic wise on the drum set, I don't think there's a better opening statement than Anthem for this band. Of course, you have other songs like By Tor and the Snow Dog, a very, like, their first true epic of the band, although you could argue Working Man is that as well. The song Fly By Night, of course, and In the End, which I think is a really great closer and a really hard rocker. It's a great sort of stepping stone to what they would do from here on out. And I think that many fans who listened to this record at the time could tell that this band was going to go places, especially with three members that are at the top of their game, two of which are my personal favorite bass player and drum player of all time. And like I said, Rush has a huge discography. I don't know if I'll ever have all the records, but now I think I have like 7 or 8. So I'm doing pretty good. Just got to keep it up, as it were. So Fly By Night, Rush, amazing. Also by Rush, also from my parents on Christmas. Farewell to Kings, the first record in their second era, which included Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, and Moving Pictures. Now, A Farewell to Kings is probably my least favorite of that era, but it's still an amazing record. Many would argue that the second era of Rush is the best era of Rush, and there's a lot of arguments to be had and a lot of good points to be made regarding that. My issue with Farewell to Kings is that in many ways, I think everything it's doing is great, but none of the songs on here are like my favorites, I think the closest would probably be Xanadu, which is the sort of epic of side one. Really creative, trippy song, really interesting, thoughtful lyrics from Neil Peart as always, and just really interesting progression throughout that song. You get Cygnus X1 on the opposite side, which of course is the two-parter, the other part appearing on the first track of Hemispheres. And I like Cygnus X1, The bass groove in the middle of that song is to die for, but I think I like Cygnus X2 better. And as far as all the other songs here, I mean, obviously Closer to the Heart is a big Rush song, but again, not one of my favorites. So while I do like this record a lot, it's not in the top echelon of Rush records for me. And so I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I own it, but not one of the top. But it's nice to have, obviously. And then when my birthday rolled around, which is January 30th, my parents got me yet another vinyl. And they got me one that would be my dad's favorite group, Cody's favorite group, the one I was missing from the big four of Pink Floyd, that being The Wall. So now I have all of the big four, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall, on vinyl. And that era of Pink Floyd, I think by far and away, is the best era of Pink Floyd. As Cody once put it, perhaps the greatest run of albums by any band ever. I'm going to have to disagree with that claim just because of this one that I'm holding, which is The Wall. I feel the same way I feel about The Wall as I do the White Album by the Beatles, which, if you don't know, is this. I think The Wall has some of Pink Floyd's best material on it. There are some amazing songs here. The other half of The Wall is just not very good, in my opinion. It's bottom rung, it's bottom barrel. It's not very interesting. It doesn't do anything for me. Half the time, I forget half the songs that are on here. But the ones that are really good, they're really damn good. Like, bar none. There's some amazing stuff on here. Arguably, some of Pink Floyd's best work is on this album. By that same token, though, there's a lot of stuff on here that it's just like not that exciting, not that great, not that interesting. And so, in a similar way to the White Album, and it's funny that both these albums are like very white imagery. I think this album's good. I don't think it's great though. It's probably in the top 5 of Pink Floyd for me, as is the White Album is in the top 5 of the Beatles for me, because the good stuff is just that good, but it's not cracking top 3 because the bad stuff is just that bad. So I have it. I have the completed great era of Pink Floyd. I'm far from completing the entire collection of Pink Floyd, but honestly, don't tell Cody. I'm not really interested in completing the entire collection of Pink Floyd because I think that a lot of their careers is kind of okay. Kill me, I know. Moving on. Led Zeppelin, In Through the Outdoor. Now, the only reason I have this is because I found it pretty decently priced at a local record store of mine. Shout out to R&R Collectibles. Otherwise, this is my least favorite Led Zeppelin album. Yes, even less than Presence. The only reason Presence is above this is because Presence has Achilles' Last Stand and Nobody's Fault But Mine. Those 2 songs are fucking amazing. The issue with this album is that while I think it's good, it just kind of does nothing super exciting for me. It's got good moments. Obviously, a song like All of My Love was a pretty big hit for the band, but even a song like All of My Love, I don't think is really that good when compared to their other hits that they released. So yeah, it's not one of my faves. In fact, it's pretty low on the tiers of Zeppelin, but it is Led Zeppelin at the end of the day. It is good. Like, it's not a bad record. It's still Zeppelin being Zeppelin. But there is a part of me that wonders where the band would have went after here had Bonham lived and had they had another 10 years of music after this. I don't know. And again, we'll never know because Bonham died and Zeppelin broke up, and they rightfully did so, right? I think it was good that the band broke up when Bonham died. There's a lot of dumb bands out there like Slayer, even though I love Slayer. They continued to work even after Jeff Hanneman died and Dave Lombardo left. And it's like, why are we still making music under Slayer? Led Zeppelin decided, no, Bonham's dead. Bonham was core to this band, therefore this band is over. And I can appreciate that. But if they had continued, I wondered if it would have sounded like this, like more of this sound. If it had, I don't know if I would have loved the rest of Zeppelin's career how I love their career as it is. Because obviously, Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 4, Houses of the Holy, Physical Graffiti, unbelievable, phenomenal records. Presence and this one, not so much. So, not sure how it would have shaken out, but for me, In Through the Outdoors, just, it's an okay record, and I have it on vinyl. So, there you go. One that I was looking for forever and finally found reasonably priced. That's because it's an older copy and kind of banged up. That would be Santana's Abraxas. I think in a previous vinyl update, I talked about Santana's first album and I was really wanting this album in particular. And I finally got it. This is easily my favorite Santana record. I think not even just my favorite. I think it just is their best if I had to put a sort of spin on it. And I think that's largely in part to just how good the songs are here. The major one, of course, is Black Magic Woman, which favorite Santana song, just absolutely phenomenal. I hate the radio edit of Black Magic Woman where they take out Gypsy Queen. I think that's a huge mistake. But of course, the studio version of the album keeps it in, which is the correct thing. But even beyond that, Oye Como Va's on here, which is amazing. Really like Mother's Daughter. Hope You're Feeling Better. All the Spanish songs I can't pronounce. I think they're all just fantastic. I think across the board, this is amazing. Not only is Santana showcasing how good he is, but the whole band is showcasing why they're great. So very happy to have it on vinyl. It is a banged up copy. It is old. That's why I found it at a good price, but the vinyl's still in good condition, thankfully. So very happy that I have it finally. Yes, these runs of albums were ones that I found at the record store I mentioned. So another one that very happy to find cheaply priced was Van Halen's OU 812. Now, if you listen to my Van Halen Roth era ranking, which feel like it came out a year ago at this point. I had mentioned on that I was a huge fan of 5150, but overall, the Van Hagar era of Van Halen, I wasn't a huge fan of. I would like to revoke that statement. I still think the Roth era of Van Halen is very much better, but the Hagar era of Van Halen is pretty great. In fact, 5150, OU812, and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, otherwise known as Fuck, I think are really great. 5150 is still my favorite. Fuck is a good album. It's not a great album, but this I would argue is also a great album. So at the time I said that everything other than 5150 Hagar wise I didn't really care for. I'd have to revoke that statement and sort of slap the old mic across the face, because this album goes pretty hard. Opening with Mine All Mine is amazing. How Do I Know That This Is Love isn't just probably even better than, you know, some of their biggest singles, probably their best single if I had to put it that way. Black and Blue is such a rager of a song. Sucker in a Three-Piece, like so many fun songs on here and so much good quality stuff that 5150 I think still remains my favorite Hagar, but this is easily neck and neck with it. I think this is really good stuff. And as far as the Van Halen discography is concerned, I think this is easily better than Diver Down, and I may even like it more than Fair Warning, believe it or not. So big fan of this record. OU812, the title, I assume it's sexual, right? Like OU8 her out too, if I had to, you know, sorry for being so vulgar. But when I'll pull it out so you can see. The vinyl has a certain image on the middle sticker part, which is this right here, if you can see it. Anybody above the age of probably 15 knows what that's probably implying. And the album's called OU812. I think we can put two and two together to say that it's probably clear what they're talking about with that title. And if they are in fact talking about that, that's a pretty funny title at the end of the day. So big fan of the record. Glad that I have it. It's a good thing Cody's here, or Cody is not here, excuse me, because if he were, he'd probably cringe very hard that I am presenting more Kiss. And this is Alive 2. You can see that I don't have the cover of it because this copy did not come with the cover, but it is in fact the double disc of Alive 2 by Kiss. So if you don't know, Alive 1, 2, and 3 were various live records that Kiss did. A lot of their fans were complaining that their studio albums didn't sound like they sound live. So they decided, well, if you feel that way, let's make live records. And so they made Alive 1 prior to Rock and Roll All Over. So the first three albums, they made Alive 1. They released prior to Destroyer. So they released the next three albums, which were Destroyer, Rock and Roll All Over, and then Love Gun, and then did Alive 2. So a lot of the songs on Alive 2 are the songs from Destroyer and Love Gun that we talked about on the Kiss episode. But the thing is, I actually think I prefer Alive 1 over Alive 2. And it's not because the songs are better. I just think the performances and the energy and the hunger of Kiss is more palpable on Alive 1 than it is on this record here, Alive 2. That being said, though, Alive 2 has killer tracks on it. Obviously, Detroit Rock City, Love Gun, just so much good stuff, right? It's great to have, and I'm glad I have it. I wish I did have the cover. That'd be nice, but it was either get it without the cover or don't get it at all. And given the price point it was at, I had to pick it up. So I'm sure it will be the first of many Kiss records I possibly get. Of course, I have the solo albums, which I already did that video. So if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Next is I'm just going to be honest, the only Who record I like, which is Who's Next. And what many would consider the best Who record, I'm with them. I think this is by far and away the best one. Quadrophenia and Tommy are fine. They're good. They have great moments, but overall, I don't think they're great records. This, I think, overall is a great record. And that's because Baba O'Reilly, Bargain, Song Is Over, Going Mobile, Behind Blue Eyes, and my favorite Who song, Won't Get Fooled Again, are on here. It is fantastic stuff. It is a perfect showing of what Who could be and Who at their best rare form. I wish all of their stuff sounded like this. I wish all of their stuff was this good. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it is not. So that's why I think that this is their best by quite a margin, actually. But I do have it. It's probably the only Who record I'll ever own, unless another Who record comes out very reasonably priced. For now, though, this is one I had to pick up because I think it's a classic, honestly. And you probably should have it in your collection if you're any sort of vinyl rock fan. All right, those are all the rock records that I'm going to go through. That's about half-ish the stack, so we still got a little bit to go. The next ones are just a hodgepodge, just random ones that fit various categories, so we're going to roll through them. Uh, I found the soundtrack to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon at my local Barnes and Nobles, and they were having a deal where you could get 3 records for, I think it was $40. So you had to pick from the record pile, 3 of them, altogether $40. So I saw this. I'm a huge fan of this movie, probably my favorite martial arts movie of all time. Um, the soundtrack I think is good. It's very much what you expect from a Chinese martial arts film. Like it does all the standard stuff. The main single on here is "A Love Before Time," which I think was nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars way back when. Um, yeah, this soundtrack's good. It's good. It does what it needs to. What I'd rather talk about right now, though, is the film. If you have not seen this film, give it a watch. Yes, it is all subtitled. Yes, it is a Chinese production. So, like, sure, it's going to be subtitled. But, like, my God, dude, this movie's so goddamn good. In particular, Michelle Yeoh, who sort of was an unknown-ish in American audience at the time. Now she's way more well-known after Everything Everywhere All at Once. But she is so goddamn good in this movie. And that scene between her and the girl who steals the green sword, like that fight where she's like going through all the weapons, might be, if not the best, one of the best fight scenes on recorded film ever. Like, just the way it flows and the choreography. And I'm pretty sure Michelle Yeoh did all the stunts in that. Like, she was handling all the weapons in that scene. That is unfreaking believable to think about. This movie is amazing. I'm sitting here thinking I might just go watch this after I'm done because I think it's that good. It is a masterclass in Chinese martial arts films, and the soundtrack is pretty good too. This is also part of the Get 3 for 40, and that is Merle Haggard's Greatest Hits Volume 1. Now, to be blunt, I'm a bigger fan of his later hits, but I'm a huge fan of Merle Haggard in terms of country, which is to say that country is by far my least favorite genre. I think there's a lot of great people in country, Merle Haggard included. I know he's not the best person. He comes from a bad background, but he did make great music. A lot of the stuff on here is fantastic. But I will say that Going Where the Lonely Go, like that era of Merle Haggard, which is way later in his career, I just like that more. I just prefer it. But, you know, it's nice to have a greatest hits of his. If I ever see volume 1 or volume whatever, I'd probably pick it up. Because it is good stuff at the end of the day. So, Merle Haggard, Volume 1, Greatest Hits. Very good. All right. Not part of the buy 3 but get 40, but part of the lexicon of contemporary pop music would, of course, be Chappell Roan and her album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess. I don't know. If you're into current pop, I don't know what I could say about Chappell Roan you don't already know or don't already think. As far as what I can add to the conversation, I think this record is amazing. If it won Album of the Year at the Grammys, I would not have been disappointed at all. I think it's worthy of that title. I'm very glad she won Best New Artist. I think she deserves it, especially after that Coachella performance or whatever performance it was, where she had like the biggest live audience at a Coachella or concert, whatever one it was ever. That's like insane to think about, especially for how new in her career she is. But there's so many great songs on here. Hot to Go, Pink Pony Club, of course. Red Wine Supernova, which is actually my favorite Chappell Roan song. I think top to bottom, this record is great. And I like how just like upfront she is and how confronting she is. She doesn't hide anything or pull her punches. In the same way Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter and now in some ways Taylor Swift do, I'm a huge fan of this new renaissance of pop artists just like saying how they feel and like not hiding behind a mask of like, oh, I'm a good person, like I think good things. It's like, no, dude, I'm a 20-year-old. I think about sex and drugs and partying. Like that's who I am. And yeah, there's moments of levity, there's moments of maturity here, but there's just as many moments of like, I'm just going to write a song about partying and hooking up. And like, I love that about pop these days. Pop in the past, not to say it never happened. Obviously you had Madonna, you had Michael Jackson talking about explicit things, but I love how like upfront explicit these artists today are, people like Chappell Roan. So very much love this record, very much appreciate her and what she's doing. And I'm excited to hear whatever comes next for her. Should be great. Okay, the next 2 are actually a combined thing. And I'll try and explain why that is, but that would be the 2020 Experience Part 1 and of course, Part 2 by Justin Timberlake. I'm actually going to start with Part 1, then go to Part 2. So if you don't know, Justin Timberlake, I mean, you should know who he is, but back in the mid 2010s, he released the 2020 Experience. But he said it was going to be a double album. So he released Part 1, and then I think like a year or so later, he released Part 2. So Part 1, of course, has like the major hits. So things like Mirrors and Suit and Tie, like the big songs of the time. And I think those are good songs. But what I want to say about this record is that both Part 1 and Part 2 combined might be my favorite pop album of the 2010s. And I know that's going to sound ridiculous, and like I didn't consume any music, or I don't know what I'm talking about. But honestly, when I think back to that time and I think back to college, I wore this thing out. I had the CD version at the time. I wasn't collecting vinyl. I cannot tell you how many times I listened to, especially Part 1, because Part 2 came later. I didn't have it on CD. But this Part 1, I ran that thing dry. I listened to it so much. In particular, songs that nobody talks about that I think are actually the best songs on here. My favorite by far is Don't Hold the Wall, track 3. That second half of Don't Hold the Wall, where the 808s come in and it's like the club beat, oh my God, it's so good. It's like Timbaland really showcasing how good of a producer he can be, when so often people write him off as just like a pop producer. It's like on these two albums, he showcases like how much talent he actually has. Then other songs like Strawberry Bubblegum, I think is amazing. Blue Ocean Floor, the closer on here, very pretty, very sultry, very nice stuff. I love this record, and I don't care if you think I'm an idiot for thinking that or think I'm crazy for thinking that. I absolutely love it. It is a part of my 20s, a part of my growing up, so I hold it very dear. I don't hold Part 2 as dearly. I do enjoy Part 2, and I think having 1 and 2 combined makes for a very great experience, but if I had to pick one, I would go Part 1 over Part 2. With that being said, though, this is another record where I think some of the best stuff just doesn't get talked about. I love True Blood, TKO, Murder, Only When I Walk Away, Amnesia, like so many good songs on here that weren't radio singles. Nobody talks about. We just talk about Future Sex Love Sounds, or the fact that Justin Timberlake kind of sucks now, which I kind of agree. He kind of sucks now. Like his last record hasn't been good. But this era, the mid 2010s, I think he was actually putting out really great work. So Part 1 and Part 2 of the 2020 Experience, I like him a lot. Sorry. Another classic record. In fact, according to Apple Music, this apparently is the greatest record of all time, which I think is absolutely absurd. But I'm going to have to agree that I do think this is one of the greatest records of the 90s, and I think it's in contention for one of the greatest rap / hip hop / R&B records ever. Do I think it's the greatest record of all time, all genres? No. I'm sorry, it's not. But I do think this thing is amazing, and I think The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill showcases how good Lauryn Hill was. And what's craziest of all is that she just kind of disappeared after this. She just decided to not really make any more albums. She would do concerts here and there, but just like radio silence after this thing came out. And it's like insane to think about, because she was on top of the world when this thing came out. I don't remember how many Grammys this thing was nominated for, but I recall it being a lot, if I'm not mistaken. This album really showcases how great she is and how great she was. And it's a fantastic listen. From the opening of Lost Ones, like you immediately know, okay, she's on fire right now. She's doing very good. She's doing top of her game material right now. And she was. And it's sad to say that she just kind of never picked it up after this, but she didn't. I think there's a reason people say it's one of the greats and one of the greatest of all time. You just listen to it and you see it. But again, the notion of it being the greatest of all time, I just don't quite see it. So I like it a lot. I think it's a great record, but I don't think it's the greatest record. Okay, 2 more. Another moment where I'm sorry, I think it's amazing and I love it. That would be the soundtrack to the movie version of Wicked that just came out, Part 1. Do not come at me with Wicked is bad. This was a terrible movie. This was a terrible production. Cynthia and or Ariana sucked. Like, do not give me any of that horse shit. They were amazing. And the funny thing about this is that I'm actually not a huge fan of Wicked. I'm lesser of a fan of Part 2. I think Part 1, the first act of Wicked, which this is what this movie is very good. Act 2 of Wicked is where it starts to fall apart for me. But the nice thing about this movie is that it was just Act 1. It was everything up to Defying Gravity, which is what Wicked is at its best. Everything up to Defying Gravity. It's everything that comes after Defying Gravity that I kind of take issue with. And I'm not going to spoil why that is, because some people haven't seen the movie, some people don't know the story, so I'm not going to spoil it. But as far as this is concerned, Act 1, Wicked, and as far as this production, this movie is concerned, this is stellar stuff. In particular, Cynthia and Ariana just, they're dynamite in this movie. They're so good together. They're so good separate. Defying Gravity is amazing. Popular is amazing. Like, all their renditions of these songs are so good. So good. You know, the sort of like B songs here, like Something Bad and Dear Old Shiz, like I could do without. But the A songs here, No One Mourns the Wicked, one of my favorite openers to a musical ever, like bar none. The Wizard and I, Cynthia's performance is amazing. What Is This Feeling? Again, Dancing Through Life, Popular, and Defying Gravity. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. I feel like I'm talking to the choir here because who hasn't seen this movie yet? But like, man, is it just good. So I'm happy to own this. Yes, it is pink and green vinyl. I'm not going to pull it out, but you can guess it is pink and green vinyl. I'm very excited to see part 2. I hope they make some concessions to make it better. I think, again, I don't want to spoil it, but I think part 2 really falls apart for several reasons. So I hope they take into consideration what makes part 2 work and the many reasons it doesn't work and then fix it. I don't know if they will. Part 1, in spite of how much they added to part 1 was pretty spot on to the musical, the stage production. So I have a feeling they're going to do the same thing for part 2. So we'll just have to wait and see. And finally, the last record I want to talk about is actually a special one. And I'm going to have to give some context to this, but if you're watching the video, you're seeing a blown up picture of my wife and I kissing. So I'm not going to subject you to that. I'll just flip it over to the backside, which is my wife and I walking during our engagement, or excuse me, our, what is it called? When you take photos directly after getting married and the post-ceremony pictures. What is that? I don't know. I'm blanking for whatever. Bridal photos? No, that's not it. Anyway, so what this is actually a special vinyl of, I wish I could plug the company right now. I'll put it in the description or something. Shout out to the company who did this for us. I can't believe I'm blanking on their name, but basically what they did was, they make vinyl. So basically you give them the tracks, that you make a playlist, they'll put it onto vinyl. What they particularly do is event vinyl. So your birthday, your wedding day, which this is. So side 1 or side A of this vinyl is all of our wedding songs. So our ceremony songs, our first dance song, our last dance song of the night, like all of that wrapped up into one vinyl. The B side of this is that at our wedding, we actually had a little phone that people could talk into and leave messages. So the entire B side of this vinyl is people who left us messages at our wedding. So a lot of our friends, a lot of our family. So we have it basically recorded for all time. So it's really cool to have this. It's like a special memento of that day where we have a lot of pictures, obviously, around the house. But this, I think, probably means the most to me just because like it's the audio capture of that day and the songs and the feelings and the excitement from the people who left messages and the fun and just everything about it. It was a perfect day, so it's nice to have it in audio form on vinyl. Again, I'll leave the description of this group and what they do and who they are in the description box because unfortunately I'm blanking right now and I should have wrote it down. I should have thought of it ahead of time, but I did not. But very cool to have this, and it's cool that they do this. So if you have a future wedding coming up and you also are a vinyl collector, keep this in mind because they do good work. It took a little bit of time to get it, right? It took like a month to process and then ship it, but they're literally creating a vinyl from scratch off a playlist. So I give them credence for that. So yeah, that is the new additions to my vinyl collection. Hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully you enjoyed. I'm sure I'll be back with another one in several weeks or months from now, but until then, do take care and hopefully we'll catch you on the next Album Fight Club.